Hey there, this is Tony, and welcome to another deep dive training. In this particular deep dive, we are going to be focusing on AI generated landscapes. And of course, AI stands for artificial intelligence. And I'm really excited about this one because of the opportunities it presents, and we'll get to that in just a moment. This is based on technology that I've been following for a couple years now, and it just hasn't been available to us. So here in Module 1, we're going to talk about foundations, and I'm going to lay out why this is such a big deal and the technology that we're going to be using and where you can expect to go over the next couple modules. So first of all, the opportunity. Thanks to new AI technologies being developed, we now have the ability to custom design photorealistic landscapes without the need to be an artist in any way. Let that sink in for a minute. Literally, with some very simple clicks of a button or very, very rough painting onto a canvas, and by I mean zero art, okay, zero artistic effort, you can create photorealistic landscapes that do not exist anywhere, but they look real. The implications are crazy with this because now we don't even have to, like public domain images, don't even need them. Although you're going to see how we can use public domain images to influence some of these outcomes, and we'll get to that later on. But this is truly amazing and groundbreaking. So these landscape photos can then be used to create art illustrations for use in illustrated books, print-on-demand products like t-shirts and mugs and stuff like that, posters, and a lot more. And I have to admit the technology is really amazing, but it's also a bit scary just because of the underlying implications. There's some aspects of this technology that's referred to as deep fakes, and that's because of its ability to create realistic looking photographs that are actually not real. They're fake. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the technology that we're going to be looking at. So one of the underlying developments here is called generative adversarial networks, or GAN. And GAN is a machine learning model in which two neural networks compete with each other to become more accurate in their predictions. As the feedback loop continues, the generator will begin to produce higher quality outputs. So what that means in layman's terms is that you have a database that contains thousands of copies in many cases of a certain type of image. Maybe it's faces, or in this case, landscapes. And the software has the ability to look at this database and then use and draw from that database to create something new. Then there is another part, a second network, that its job is to look at what was output and say whether it's real or it's fake. If it says fake, then it's essentially challenges the first network to produce a better result. And so it goes back and forth like that, hence the name adversarial. So in essence, you have two bits of code that are competing against each other to see who can come up with the better realistic outcome. That's a very simplified way of putting it, but the result is that as you let it run and it learns, it can get pretty high tech in the outputs that it creates. Very realistic, and you'll see as we get into this. Now, the technology is still just a few years old. 2016, I believe, is whenever it was first developed. And so it's only going to get better. It's already starting to show up in different programs because it can be used in a lot of different ways. But what we're going to be looking at in this training, in this deep dive, is very rough. Okay, the technology is not super polished, but it works. And I've gotten some crazy cool results out of it. So the other part of the technology that you're probably more familiar with, not the name of it necessarily, but it's also a part of this technology as well, and that's neural style transfer. So Neural style transfer is a class of software algorithms that manipulate digital images or videos to adopt the appearance or visual style of another image. Now, there's a lot of software out that already does this, and we've looked at some of those in past deep dives, like Paint is a really good example. There's also a number of apps like Prisma comes to mind as one of the more popular ones, where you take a photograph, you apply a filter. Well, it's actually not a filter. You apply an algorithm, and it turns it into like a Van Gogh painting. Okay, so that's neural style transfer. Both of these two technologies work really well together, and they can learn from each other. As a matter of fact, some of the newer models that are being built with the code will send the outputs back and forth between the two to further advance the end result. And some of the technology that we'll be looking at in this training, I know it sounds hard. It's not. You'll see. But some of the technology that we'll be looking at actually incorporates both, and you'll see how that works and interplays once we get into the actual software itself. So our process that we're going to be using with these GANs is pretty simple and straightforward. Creating 100% original landscapes has never been easier and can be generated using free software. So the software that we're going to be looking at, there's two primary software programs. One has several options built within it. They're both 100% free. They're open source. Anybody can use them. One is web-based. The other is desktop-based, but it's available for both Windows, Mac, and Linux. So pretty much everybody is covered in every imaginable way. And so the creation process is pretty straightforward. First of all, you use the software to generate a landscape based on the segmentation map that you create. And that segmentation map is basically a fancy word for a very basic drawing using different colors of just different colors that represent a certain type of photograph. So like there might be a green that represents grass, a blue that represents sky, that kind of thing. The image result that you get once you have created this segmentation map and the landscape is to export the image result. These are typically low res, so we're talking 512 pixels square is what I've been seeing mostly. So you'll export that image. They're typically at that resolution too small to really do anything with from a print perspective. So you'll want to up-res that image to a higher resolution. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. And then import the result of that into a photo to art app of your choice, which I'll be sharing some of my favorites, and you probably likely have many that you already use as well. So the technology that we're going to be digging into in this training, first is GAN Beta, which is being developed by the software company NVIDIA. And they're well known for creating video cards for in computers and stuff like that, but they also do a lot of research as well. And then the second one is called Runway ML, ML standing for machine language. And within Runway ML, they have these things called workspaces that are basically related software, but the results that you get from them is different. And for landscapes specifically, what we're going to be looking at within Runway ML is Spade Landscapes, Spade Cocoa, and StyleGAN. Now, StyleGAN works a little bit differently than the other two. The first two work very similar to GAN, which I believe is Module 2, where you paint a basic segmentation map and then it outputs your landscape based on what you paint. StyleGAN auto-generates landscapes without you painting. You have the ability to control the differences and the variables, but it outputs dozens, if not hundreds or thousands, however long you choose to let it run, which is also super cool. So here's a couple examples that I just output real quickly from StyleGAN. And you can see that they're not 100% picture perfect. There's some little rough edges around, some pixelating and all of that. But they're unique. And obviously there's some relation one to the other, but they look fairly realistic. They don't have to look 100% photorealistic, because once we import them into the photo editing or the photo to art software, all those extra details go away anyways, right? Because we're creating paintings. And that's one of the reasons why these are so well suited to that end result. So Runway ML also has the ability to generate other types of unique images as well, depending on the workspace you choose. And you'll see what I mean by workspace when we get into this software in Module 3. So StyleGAN, we've already mentioned outputs in landscapes, but it also has the ability to create rainbows, which is very interesting. Even bedrooms, for whatever reason. It's super cool. You'll see. Cars, faces, lots of things. Then there's also BigGAN within Runway ML that allows you to generate unique copies of all kinds of animals, food, furniture, you name it. It's really crazy. The results vary a lot, so it definitely takes some tinkering and experimenting because, again, this software is in its early stages. We're just kind of capitalizing on it early, if you will. And so experimentation is really the key with these. And you'll see that once we get into this software. So as I mentioned earlier, the outputs are pretty small, which means that for us to use them in any kind of print form or higher resolution form, they need to be resized. So typically 512 pixels square is the output resolution, but any image editor can be used to resize those images to a larger size. So in other words, you could use Photoshop or Photopea or GIMP or, Affinity Photo if you want. And they will give you the ability to resize the images or upres the images, although you will not get your best result with those. I mean, you can use them, and because we're converting them into paintings, it won't really matter that much. But there are also other software options available that allow you to resize images, and that's what they're created for. The one that I use is Topaz Gigapixel AI, and it actually incorporates some of this technology in it for the purpose of resampling and upresing photos. And it works extremely well. It's part of their studio, or you can pick it up separately, of course. On-one resize is also another great option. I don't have the most recent version of this, but I have used this a number of times before. As a matter of fact, I used this before I got Gigapixel, and it works extremely well. Acvis, the software company that makes a lot of the draw and paint programs, also has one called Magnifier. And then in Runway ML, they have a couple workspaces built in there. One is called EsserGAN. It's an abbreviation. EsserGAN and Image Super Resolution. And both of those will also resize. One of them resizes at a 2x. The other resizes up to 4x. Okay, so those are free options also. And there's other web-based versions and software versions. There's even app programs out there that will do resizing as well. So if you have one that you prefer and that you use, that's fine. Now, the last big step that we have, once we've output our image and we've resized it, is to actually convert it into some kind of an illustration. That's our end goal, right? And so the recommended illustration software that I use more than any other, I mean, I have pretty much everything that exists. Whether it's an app or web-based program or desktop program, I pretty much have bought it all, as you've noticed by other deep dives and hybrid illustration styles and all of that. So anything that I've demoed in any of those courses, which are dozens upon dozens of software options, they'll all work. It really comes down to the desired end result that you're after. Okay. And I have a few that I prefer that I use on a regular basis. One is JixiePix Impresso Pro, which is primarily for converting photographs into oil paintings. Like, that's what it does. And it does it extremely well. I'd say it's probably the best on the market for doing that. There's also same company, Pastello Pro, and I talk about these a lot, so you're probably already familiar with them if you don't already own them. Pastello Pro, their primary strength is more chalk, colored pencil, charcoal pencil, pastels, those types of mediums. And then, of course, Watercolor Studio is just that. It's watercolor paintings. Topo Studio Impressions is also another great option, and it's now built into Topo Studio. And they give you the ability to mimic a lot of different natural media styles. And then last but not least, I wanted to include Paint. Paint is one of the programs that we've looked at before. Well, actually, we've looked at all of these before in other deep dives. But Paint is one of the neural style transfer programs. It's my go-to, my personal favorite. And you can get some really interesting results using that as well. And so that's what I have for this module, just kind of a foundation of where we're going to be heading over the next couple modules here. So starting in Module 2, we're going to look at Gauguin, which is the first program that I really started focusing on for generating landscapes. And you're going to geek out on this. So I'm going to give you the grand tour, the deep dive, if you will, into this program and show you how to use it for yourself.